Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon and good evening depending on where you're watching this. I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank the Creative Culture team for inviting me to speak at this year's gamification seminar. I'm honoured to be involved and I hope you find this talk interesting and enjoyable. So my name is Alex Masters and I'm a designer, researcher and technologist based in the UK. I work at Coventry University within the Game Changers team, which is part of the Disruptive Media Learning Lab, or DMLL for short. The DMLL is an innovation lab for creating new forms of education practice, which is where I've been based since 2015 when the lab launched. Prior to my job at the DMLL, I've worked in a variety of different fields, including graphic design, web development, photography, journalism, social media and brand protection management, among several other fields. This variety of experience has given me a mixed skill set, which has shaped my work and gives me a unique perspective. And this perspective has informed my research into frugal education. So what exactly do I mean by frugal education? Well, in a nutshell, frugal education is about harnessing the power of design thinking, leveraging available resources, and embracing sustainability to develop creative, practical, and sustainable education. The concept itself takes inspiration from the practice of frugal innovation. And frugal innovation is about embracing limitations in resources, whether they're financial, physical, or institutional, and using creative methods to turn these constraints into advantages and solve problems. So the essence of frugal innovation is about doing more with less, but you can think of it more as teaching more with less or learning more with less. This is why it acts as a foundation that frugal education is built upon. So as a boy, I was inspired by my granddad's shed, which is a strange thing, but it was something that was big and very important to me. So sorting through materials, building, exploring, understanding, and inventing new things along the way. It was one of the highlights of spending time with my grandparents, and it was always an educational and inspiring process, learning through play. The picture is not of my actual granddad's shed, but it's a good example of the kind of space that I would be in at the time. So this was my first frugal innovation experience, essentially, and it shaped who I am and continues to shape the work that I do. This is a little bit of my granddad's shed mentality that I apply to all the projects I work on. But things have changed a lot since I was a boy, and there are many more influences that have shaped my own approach to education design, which led to the development of the frugal education concept in the first place. So these are design thinking, which is a process for innovation based on understanding user needs, challenging assumptions, redefining problems, and creating solutions through an iterative cycle of design and development. There are 5 commonly accepted phases of design thinking, as you can see in the diagram. These are empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. These phases are essential tools for creating new education innovation, in my opinion, and they factor very heavily into the concept of frugal education. We've used design thinking in different forms at Coventry, and design sprints is one of those that have been used to great effect, both with teachers and with learners. The Creative Culture team at UNIMAS have embraced the sprint process with their staff and students, in turn influencing the development of frugal education principles, which I'm going to talk about more later on. Systems thinking is another key inspiration. The fundamental principle of systems thinking is that everything is interconnected. This same principle applies to sustainability of education. This too is a complex system linked to many others on a global scale, such as economics, health, and climate change. The circular economy is another influence. Circular systems employ reuse, sharing, repair, refurbishment, remanufacturing and recycling to create closed-loop systems. This helps to minimize the use and limit the creation of waste, pollution and carbon emissions. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. If you've not looked at these before, I suggest you take a look at the link at the bottom of the screen and have a good read about these. So the future sustainability of our planet kind of depends on these, and our global commitment to addressing these 17 goals is very important. Everything we do as educators should seek to address these in some form. So sustainable development is a key influence in the concept of frugal education. If you don't think that sustainable development is something that applies to your education practice, then maybe you need to rethink your practice, because we all need to do our bit to have an impact. And last but not least, there's donut economics, with a very strange name, I will admit. This acts as a kind of moral compass for frugal education and for the world in general. So the donut itself represents sustainable social foundation combined with an ecological ceiling. So this is represented in the diagram. So if you see the inner line and the outer line represent these two factors, social and ecological. So staying in this middle ground between these will help guide us forward so that we don't exceed planetary boundaries that protect Earth's life support systems. We are, at the end of the day, all part of the same system, so we must all strive to protect this. And education has an important role to play in that system. So these 6 models, concepts and frameworks all inform the concept of frugal education as we seek to apply them in an educational context. Hopefully this helps to articulate what frugal education is all about. So what I'd like to talk about now is what frugal education is not about. It's not about being cheap, and it's not low quality. Instead, it's about being resourceful, about developing innovative solutions through creative problem solving. That's really what it's all about. So through this process, it develops resilience in solving future problems, and in doing so, doing this in sustainable ways that others can then adopt and use in their own practice. So this is Arvind Gupta and his Toys from Trash. You may have come across him before. He's quite a famous educator. He's taken the garden shed approach and applied it to teaching aspects of science, among other subjects, using found and readily available materials. This is frugal in one of its purest forms, frugal innovation in one of its purest forms. And of course, this example is grounded in education. On the complete opposite end of the scale, we have Formula One. Surprising as it might seem, in my opinion, Formula One cars are an excellent example of frugal innovation. Each component in an F1 car is designed to carry out multiple functions wherever possible, whilst also costing as little as possible to manufacture and only lasting a very short amount of time. Most of those components will last for maybe one race before they're replaced. So really it's about doing more with less, and this is at the peak of engineering innovation. So really, why is this important? Well, it reframes the problem from I can't do it because I don't have the budget, or I don't have the time, or I don't have the space, and reframes that. You see, frugal education is not about being cheap or poor quality. It's about being resourceful, sustainable, and creative. And these are all things that we can do within our own practice, regardless of where we work or who we are and where we practice our education. So to give you a little bit more context, this is a building that I work next to. It's the engineering building at Coventry University. And as you can see, it's a fancy building. It's very expensive, and there are a lot of students around the campus. This might not really seem like a setting where frugal education would be applicable, but it very much is, especially now that we're in a global pandemic. So these well-funded university campuses face increasing pressure now to save money. We have a reduced student population due to Brexit, due to COVID. And so we need to find ways of doing more with less, just like I talked about before. Arvind Gupta has to do that with using locally found materials to teach science and maths. And we have a similar problem here in the UK, regardless of the budget that we have. We have a lot of students with a lot of requirements, and we need to really look at how we support those students and stretch money a lot further. Now, many educators and learners have already embraced these frugal approaches to great success, as Arvind Gupta is a good example, but I'm sure many of you have done the same. Some out of necessity and others out of choice, but each application provides insights into new methods of practice that we can deliver high quality, sustainable and positively disruptive education using. And this applies to all nations, regardless of population size, wealth or politics. We all have the same challenges to adapt to, and I think high quality education in a world-changing pandemic scenario is very important to deliver, and I think we can do that in a frugal way. I also believe that the constraints here breed creativity, and it'll be those that leverage available resources in new and novel ways that will provide some of the most innovative solutions for providing sustainable and accessible education for everybody. So frugal approaches to education, I think, will become increasingly more important as the world adapts to these new norms. And to bring this back to the playful theme of the conference, I'll point out a few examples of frugal education in practice that which are taking place across Malaysia, Indonesia and Vietnam as part of the ACES and Creative Culture international research projects that I'm involved with the rest of the team. In these projects, we're testing and implementing frugal and playful education principles as a means of fostering creative problem-solving skills, resilience and competencies in 21st century skills within our partner countries. So firstly, we've got Unimas and the Creative Culture team, who are also part of ACES, and they're hard at work creating the Playbus design. This is a wonderful example of frugal approach to education space design, one that can be adapted to suit an unlimited number of uses depending on the needs of the target audience. So they've taken an existing Unimas bus and they're refitting this with a variety of different educational tools and resources that they can then use to travel to different locations to teach STEM subjects to remote villages and urban areas as well as on campus. The ACES Vietnam team are hard at work building their own educational playground in a frugal way, one that recycles and repurposes existing materials and resources and uses local materials in sustainable ways to build their new playground experience. The space will act as a platform for a variety of educational activities within the school and within the local community, and will inform future iterations of the playground design to be built in other locations across Vietnam. The ACES Indonesia team have developed a frugal STEM program for water purification using found and recycled materials and resources. And the team have been delivering workshops and collecting data on its effectiveness at a variety of locations in their nearby schools and communities. As you can see by the video, it's a very engaging experience for the students, and the footage really does speak for itself. The various partner countries in ACES are working collaboratively to co-create a STEM bucket initiative, and these are activities for delivering science, technology, engineering and maths subjects to students using practical items and resources that are collected together in a box or bucket in this example, and different students will be able to use those to solve different problems, and they can also include their own materials and resources into the collection to solve the problems that they're faced with. The aim here is to build social resilience and enrich the learning experience of students living in both urban and rural environments. It also forms part of a wider ACES challenge that educators in Malaysia, Indonesia and Vietnam can all take part in, which I'll talk about later on. So by combining playful pedagogies with frugal design principles, we can develop engaging and sustainable learning designs that can be adopted, remixed and reshared by educators all around the world. I think we can achieve this while working with communities in rural Borneo, which is something that we've already done with the Creative Culture team in Unimas. We find different ways to work effectively as a team with limited resources, some of which are high-tech and some are low-tech. So we took part in a project with Long Lamai, a rural Borneo community, and everything that we took there was frugal in nature, whether it was the working constraints that we had, the using of available materials and being flexible, or building at the speed of need to achieve our goals as a team. In a less remote example, I was lucky enough to be part of the very first gamification seminar that took place while we were in Malaysia for the Creative Culture Project in 2018, I think it was. We ran a rapid game design workshop with around 90 educators across the country. They all were together in the seminar, so we had them all in one space. So we used some mahjong paper, a few whiteboard markers, some post-it notes, and a coffee cup worth of Lego for each table, and we organised them into groups. We were able to engage and inspire the participants to go from completely blank slate to an innovative game-based learning design within just an hour. And we turned this big time constraint and limited resources into an engaging, playful, and most importantly, educational experience. After sharing the blueprints to this session online, the design was adopted and remixed by various educators around the world, including as part of a main activity for a GAMUP, which is the name of the team, conference that took place in Egypt. And this is all because we shared these resources openly and freely on the web with clear instructions for how others could deliver the same practice. This rapid game design workshop is a great example of an iterative Frugal education design. The design itself has been refined and reused in many different ways by many different educators and demonstrates a circular pedagogy model in action. And what I mean by circular pedagogy is shifting our perceptions from this linear design process of one-time use learning activities that are very fixed structures with a limited lifespan, and really flipping that into a reusable, flexible design that feeds into a circular process where we can learn from the practice and redesign and rebuild that in an iterative way. So let me explain this with a visual. So a linear design model would look something like this. It starts with a design phase, followed by resourcing, building and delivering. If we're simply creating an educational design that we might use only once, then this might be sufficient, albeit a little bit closed-minded. We want to convert this from a linear process that might take the form of a single-use learning design and convert that into a cyclical process like so. By iterating on your design to improve its effectiveness or update it to take into consideration new features, new information, or new techniques, we want to turn that linear model into a cyclical process, one that informs its next version in an iterative cycle. To make this more sustainable, we can recycle materials and resources from the creation and delivery stages and feed them back into the design process as resources for the next iteration. You can see this in the diagram with the green marking above. So now we have a basic circular model, but we can further enrich our educational design through research and through the sharing of our designs as open educational resources. The blue ring you see represents research-enriched learning. So research informs the design and development process. Prototyping allows for the rapid development of new designs to support the learning and teaching practice. Evaluation examines the effectiveness of your design throughout the creation process and into the delivery. And open sourcing enables you to share your designs for others to learn from, use existing open source designs to inform your ongoing research, and as a resource that you can then apply and redesign your activities with through a continuous iterative cycle of refinement. This forms a circular pedagogy model, one that doesn't simply regurgitate the same materials and resources and educational practices each time, but instead builds upon each past iteration and contributes educational designs and resources to the wider educational community around the world through that open sharing practice. But this is all well and good to talk about in a model, but how can we practice this for ourselves? So that's where Frugal Education's guiding principles come into play. Through learning from past projects, both in the DMLL and in our international research projects, combined with elements of the frameworks and concepts that I've discussed earlier, the following three principles have been designed as the foundations for Frugal Education. These are: design with an open mind, leverage available resources, and build at the speed of need. Those all sound great and everything, but what do we exactly mean by that? Well, each principle is broken down into 3 aspects that you can see on the screen. Each of these add a little bit more context and scaffolding, which you can use to create educational practices in a more frugal way. To help you apply these aspects within your own practice, we've created an open resource as an aid. So these are the Frugal Education action cards, and they take aspects that I've discussed previously and breaks them into 3 actions for each aspect that you can consider when creating your own educational designs in a frugal way. And in keeping with the principles themselves, these cards are available for you to download for free at frugal.education/cards. These are brand new, so much so that I don't even have a physical copy myself, which is ridiculous because I created them. But that leads me to the next point, where the Creative Culture team in Malaysia were keen to try these out in their Learning Science Master's student class. While I was still finishing the designs, they asked me if I could provide a PDF version that they could print so they could have enough decks for all of their students. I was kind of jealous at this point because I joined one of their classes and I was the only person in the class that didn't have a set of cards, which was a funny experience to have, I must admit. This in itself is a really good example of frugal education in practice. The Creative Culture team embraced these new ideas and experimentation in creative ways, combining ideas and practices from different disciplines and adapting their pedagogic practice in response to these new ideas. The cards are now being used in the Learning Sciences Master's course, and different teams in Indonesia and Vietnam as part of the ACES case studies are also using the cards and have already been repurposing them into posters that can be hung around classrooms to inspire staff to design creative, practical and sustainable education. So please feel free to try the cards out for yourself, or if you know anyone else that might find them useful, please send them a link. If you do use the cards and find them useful, please share your experiences with the hashtag Frugal Education. If you or someone that you know has a great playful and frugal learning design that they'd like to share, why not enter it into the ACES STEM Bucket Challenge? This is a cross-country competition looking at playful and frugal designs addressing science, technology, engineering and maths-based educational practice. It'll be taking place early next year, and winners will feature in the ACES educational ebook as standout examples of excellent practice, with additional prizes yet to be announced. For more information on this, visit aces.gchangers.org. And if you come across any great examples of frugal education or want to raise awareness of the work of someone you know who is doing great things in this space, then please share on Twitter using the hashtag. We're a global community of educators and we can work together, just like these penguins, to make education more creative, practical and sustainable for everybody. So thanks for your time today. I hope you found this talk useful, and I hope it gives you plenty to consider when designing educational spaces, activities and resources in the future. Thanks again to the amazing Creative Culture team for inviting me to speak at your amazing conference. I was there for the first one, and to be invited back as a keynote is truly an honour. So thank you again. You can find out more about our projects in the Game Changers team at gchangers.org, and you can find out more about my research and other related posts at frugal.education. You can also find me personally on Twitter at AlexMasters. And thanks again for your time, and please enjoy the rest of the seminar. Take care.
Mr. Alex is actually here with us. Good morning, Mr. Alex.
Good morning, everybody. Hope you can hear me okay.
Yeah, very clear. Yeah, thank you for joining us. I know it's really early there in the UK. Perhaps
it's not too bad now. It's getting there. We still can't see the sun, but hopefully soon.
Okay. Do you want to say something to the audience?
Yes, I would just like to, again, thank you for inviting me to take part in this year's seminar. It's an absolute honor to do so. And just kind of like, I realize the conference really is focusing on the implementation of playful learning practice. And really what we found through our research is that frugality plays an important role in delivering playful learning practice, especially in rural communities. And one of the things that we found is universal across those that are in rural or poorer communities, and even in Western large cities and places with lots of funding and available resources, is that really those resources appear to be in abundance but aren't, and we all have the same problems in that we have not enough time, not enough money, and not enough people around to solve some of our educational goals. So really what this was designed for was to try and take that head on and address that issue, and try and give people a bit more empowerment in the creation and design of learning an educational practice, and trying to take that idea that if you don't have much available to use, that you can use that as a creative incentive, really, to sort of drive your creativity. The spaces, looking at public spaces and how you might use that for your educational practice, looking at the materials you have that you perhaps wouldn't use traditionally, whether that's sustainable natural resources and maybe the resources your students can bring to the classroom, and really make them part of the design process, make them co-creators of your design. So really this is kind of why this fits so well with the playful learning approach. As you've seen in the rapid game design workshop, it's really not about equipment and high technology. It was really about simple tools and an engaging, playful approach that really did engage our educators and has been very well received in many countries. So it's just really trying to take that creative approach and learning from frugal innovation, which is, as I mentioned in the talk, about doing more with less, and trying to leverage that to better improve your educational practice. A great example, in fact, was the talk just previous about Minecraft, which was very, very enjoyable to watch. It's a great example of a frugal education practice. The technology, yes, it's computer-based, but it is many, many years old now. But it's being used again in an innovative way and engaging students. And you don't have to be using the latest, greatest technology to solve the problems that you have. You can use technologies that are many years old and just apply them in a new way. So it's one of my favorite examples, in fact, is Minecraft. It's a really, really powerful environment and community building application.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Alex. Again, you can download a copy of Frugal Cards to help design education in a frugal way. You can check out the links. It's in the chat to download the cards. All right.
Yes, one thing that I would like to add for the cards, as I mentioned in the talk, they're very new. And what we intend to do in the future is produce a various selection of playmats that give you different ways to use the cards. However, they are very, very flexible, and they are really designed, each card, to be a consideration for you to apply to your own practice. So what we are interested in seeing is, without giving anybody any rules or any guidance, is how they might use those cards. So to open or print them and then look at them and see how they might apply them, and then feedback to us how you're using them in your classroom or in your design process, so that we can co-create some of the use cases for the cards. We're kind of doing this in a bit of a grassroots approach. So I'm just seeing there is a question in the Q&A section here. Do you see any challenges of frugal education in any subjects, example, science, may require proper tools for experiments. Could frugal education principles still be applied? Absolutely, because this is a really great example. So frugal innovation, some of the most successful approaches that have been successful achievements in that have been around subjects like sciences. So I don't have a link available to me, but someone designed a tiny microscope using just card and a small lens that could be printed and could be produced and flat packed and shipped all over the world. Now, this is an example of a tool that would normally cost many hundreds of, possibly even thousands of pounds for a high quality microscope. And they were able to create this using everyday materials that could be shipped to anyone in the world to use for science practice. And it's very, very popular with students, young children. I'll try and find a link and I'll pop it in the chat, because this is a really, really great question and a really good solution to kind of link the two together.